Hi, everybody. Welcome to Weekly Wellness with Miss K and Dr. D. I'm Miss K. I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in Indianapolis.
And I'm Dr. D, and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist here in Indianapolis.
And what we're going to talk about tonight has to do a lot with an incident that happened to you last week. You had kind of a rough Friday, I believe it was.
It was Friday.
Surprising situation that was pretty tough on you.
Yeah, it was very difficult. So we've always had a lot of animals. Animals are very, very important in our life.
Yes.
Very important.
Ours as well.
And so last Wednesday we realized that our elderly kitty, Choppy, who's 18, was not doing well. She hadn't been doing well for a while, but she looked really, really bad last Wednesday. And then what happened on Thursday is that she kind of rebounded and she was doing better and she was walking around and she actually slept with Rob and things looked better. And then on Friday, she looked really terrible again.
Yeah.
And so we decided we needed to take her into the vet. And I kind of thought we were going to have to euthanize her. But we asked the vet to come take a look at her anyway because she had rebounded the night before. And we kind of wanted just to get his opinion on, how did he think? Because that's one of the hardest, most ungodly decisions to have to make. It's terrible. To put an animal to sleep. It's just
been in that situation knows that it's
so painful.
Just excruciating.
Yeah,
nothing is the right answer.
If you're screwing up, you don't want to.
It's too early. It's too.
Yeah, it's hell. It really is hell.
Yeah.
And so Rob and I went into the the room, exam room, and we were sitting there and we were petting her and talking to her and telling her she was a good kitty, and then all of a sudden, we just looked up at each other because we realized she had died, and it was just the most overwhelming feeling. We both felt it. We felt something happen.
Yeah.
And we just looked up and acknowledged to each other that she had passed.
Man, that's so.
And then right as she passed, I always keep my phone on silent because I don't like the sound of it. But I had for some reason had not had it on silent. And right when she passed, the text bell rang.
Yeah,
and it
so
was
crazy.
Just
it's so crazy.
It was really very emotional and very wonderful in a bittersweet way because we were with her and we were comforting her and it was at that moment she decided it was okay to go, but incredibly painful, but that's just part of life. Death is a part of life, and it's difficult with animals, it's difficult with humans. It's just an incredibly emotional, at times gut-wrenching experience.
And I also had a kitty that passed away about a month ago now that you were there with me for that. And, again, just slightly different circumstances, but really just a heart-wrenching situation. Yeah. But, and what we talked about is how our animals, our other animals had reacted to the passing of the one animal. And just how much that relates to what we're talking to tonight, and just like the changes in how those other pets were responding, their eating habits, their behavior,
they're coping because they feel this loss, and so like with our one other kitty that's left, Cannonball, she now hangs out with the dogs. So she feels this loss, she feels this absence, and so she has adjusted her behavior in order to self-soothe in a way. She literally has found a pillow that is about the size of her, and she sits with the dogs while they sit on their dog beds. Yeah. And it's apropos because we as humans have to do the same thing when we lose other loved ones, when we lose other humans. We have to learn to cope with that loss, cope with that absence, and adjust our behavior in order to be okay and in order to live after death.
And so that's what we're talking about tonight is we're talking about grief and loss, and how do we move on after losing a loved one, and how do we have our life after the passing of somebody that's been very important to us.
Yeah.
And so that was just interesting, and just how the animals reacted, and human beings do the same thing. They all have their different ways of responding. We all have our different ways of responding to that kind of a loss. And I think we were talking about when we were preparing for this, is just that we've been lucky to not, other than our grandparents and
that's been a long
time ago, and also not an untimely death. These were elderly people. And so, but in our family, we have not had to deal with an untimely death or a very sudden tragic situation with a family member. I mean, certainly.
And we haven't actually had very much death in the family, which is, we're really blessed in that way that we haven't had to deal with that. But of course, that's part of life, and we will have to deal with that.
Yes, it is inevitable, and it's scary and awful. And some people that we know and that we work with, have experienced very untimely, tragic passing and deaths of family members and very close friends. And so this is a part of everybody's life, whether it's happened to you yet. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And how do we deal with this kind of a situation? Just like we pointed out before, just that we all experience loss in such different ways, and of course it is a part of living, so we are all going to experience it. And
but to that end, we have tips.
We have
our
tips,
but it's also with the acknowledgement, because we're gonna give tips, but it's just so important to realize that we all do it differently. So the tips are kind of general overall. This is
good
what to look out for.
They're good. Yes, they're good guidelines to have and to try and follow as best you can. But again, we can't predict how we are all going to respond to the loss of somebody. And so, as best we can, these are good tips to try and follow when something happens or is about to happen, and things like that.
Correct.
Yes. So number one. So 3 tips. Number 1 being to talk about the death. Reach out to family and friends as much as you can, as much as possible. So talking, number 1.
Number 1.
And number two, accepting your feelings. Sounds very simple, but it's not so easy.
Much more complex than that. Yep.
And then number 3 is our ongoing
standard, the gold standard.
The gold standard to mental
self-care
health is self-care.
Which may include flossing, which I just found on your bedroom floor.
I know, we're sitting on my bedroom floor because we've got family in town.
I don't
and
think
it's quite loud out.
That wasn't.
This is gross.
That was used.
Most likely, yeah. So it's pretty gross. So
anyway, back to what we were talking about. So
talking. What
does that mean?
So, and this may be, again, allowing yourself to reach out to family and friends, perhaps a mental health professional, if you feel that is necessary, to begin to open up about your feelings about the loss of the loved one, and just trying to keep yourself from bottling everything up and getting stuck in your head, which is a very dicey place to be stuck when you are dealing with a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings that that need to come out. So talking is huge, and this again. And
if you're preparing for a death, so if you have somebody who's terminally ill in your family, or something to that effect, to start an ongoing relationship with a mental health professional, to just start getting yourself ready to deal with how difficult this is going to be.
Finding that support.
Early on.
If this is an impending death, and so that you can begin to start processing what is going to happen, and then when it does happen.
And then I have a friend who so her father was passing. He was quite ill, and she knew that he only had a very brief time left, about 2 months, and and she had had a very strained relationship with him. There was many, many, many years where she did not get the support from him that she needed. He was absent. And so what she chose to do is that she chose to take those last 2 months of his life and she spent them with him. And what they ended up talking about was everything from the pain and the hurt that she had all the way up to what does he want for dinner tonight.
Right.
So just a huge gamut of things.
Right.
Because she knew that she had this very small amount of time, and this was a gift.
Yes.
This was a gift to be able to see this man and spend time with him and actually forge some kind of relationship with him.
Right.
When there had never really been a strong one. And it was, it was heart-wrenching to hear her talk about it, but it was so necessary for her. And she was blessed to be able to have this, these 2 months, because once he passed, she said a huge weight was lifted off her shoulders. She had gotten the closure that she needed. It wasn't that she got all of her questions answered, like, where in the hell were you for all this time?
Right.
It was she got the closure she needed to be able to move on.
Right.
After he
and
passed.
that's huge. I mean, as far as like being able to start to process that person no longer being there, but that's a gift to be able to have that opportunity. Not everybody has that opportunity.
True.
So when something like this does happen, and there has been a death of a loved one, being very careful, like we've talked about before, not to isolate yourself, but to, as difficult as it can be to imagine going out with friends or doing something in public or what, just to give yourself the opportunity to, when people are reaching out to you, to let yourself go out. You may not even choose to just talk about the actual death, but what we've talked about before is how important just that socialization is, even if you're not choosing to discuss the death, but you are with friends, you are in a supportive environment of some kind, and you may just go out and see a movie and say, look, I don't want to talk about what's happened, but I really need to be out, and to take advantage of those opportunities when people are reaching out to you.
And it really is
as
amazing.
Much as you might not feel like it,
because we don't always realize how impactful socialization is in a positive way, and how impactful isolation is in a negative way.
Yes.
And sometimes we can get so wrapped up in the loneliness and so wrapped up in the meanness that we lose perspective that life goes on.
Yes.
And so what the point you're making is very important, because it isn't necessarily like, oh my God, I have to go out and talk to everybody and tell them how I'm feeling and blah, blah, blah. No,
not necessarily.
It's about those subtle reminders that you're still alive.
Right.
And that you're going to have to be in the world.
And it does take...
It takes time.
It takes time, and it takes some effort. And
Huge effort.
We'll talk about that a little bit
later
in our third tip. But, so, yes, talking, reaching out, accepting support, asking for support, whatever you have to do to get through this.
Yep.
Number two, accepting your feelings. This is really huge.
Huge.
Because we have talked about how, people experience loss in such different ways, and you cannot really predict what you're going to feel when this person is taken away from you.
Yeah.
And some of those feelings may make you very uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
And, people, we've talked about like the example of if you lost a loved one in a car accident, for example, and the anger that you might begin to feel at that person for like, why weren't you driving safely?
Right.
Why weren't you paying attention? And how uncomfortable and guilty and terrible that can make you feel, that you're having all this anger towards this deceased person. But be willing to accept that this is all normal.
Incredibly normal.
Even in its most uncomfortable, the most uncomfortable feelings that you may be having are normal.
Yeah. Or why, even if it was a terminal disease, say your spouse passes because of a terminal disease, and there was nothing that person could do. But for some reason, you just feel so angry. Why did you leave me? How could you leave me? You know, didn't I love you enough? Didn't you love me enough? Didn't you fight harder? Why has this happened?
Right.
You know, as again, it is uncomfortable, but it's those feelings that you it's okay. It's okay to be angry and resentful and just you know, just feel like you have no right to feel that way, but you do. And
at the same time, I think when, particularly if there's been like a long chronic illness and you have been a caregiver for somebody for a very long time, and it may have been very, very difficult to care for this person, and emotionally, physically painful, and at their passing, as much as you love them and cared for them, you may feel a little bit of relief. And
that's a very good
peace.
Point.
And, and actually maybe some contentedness for the first time in many, many years.
Because for the first time, you are actually able to go to the grocery without worrying about this person.
Or exactly. Or just, be able to get through an hour of the day without making sure that, medications have been passed, or checking vital signs, or any of those kinds of things that happen at the end of life when you're a caregiver for somebody. So accepting that it's okay for you to even feel some peace. When you have been struggling for a really long time as a caregiver.
That's a very good point.
But that's okay to feel that. You shouldn't feel guilty about having that feeling of some relief in a way.
And then my girlfriend who I spoke about a minute ago, who lost her father, again, because she was able to have those 2 months, she was able to feel a lot of feelings that she had tried to not feel for a really long time. And she said it was incredibly painful. It was so painful, but she said it was the right kind of pain. It was the kind of pain she needed. It was the pain that was cathartic. And it answered questions for her. It allowed her to move on. And it's not that it felt good. It's just, it felt like it needed to feel. And I think that was honest to God, that was one of the most poignant things I've heard about death ever, is when she said it was painful, but it was the right kind of pain.
And just getting down to the fact that you're going to feel what you feel. You don't even know what it might be. You can't even predict it, but it's okay. You must let yourself have those feelings. Even if they're uncomfortable.
And don't let anybody tell you different. Because sometimes well-meaning folks say stuff that they should just leave to themselves. And so if if you're feeling something and you share it with somebody else and they give you some kind of grief for it,
sorry, but you know what? You get to be who you are, and you get to feel what you feel. And you do not let anyone make you feel that you're not doing this right.
That you're not grieving right. You're grieving
that
wrong.
Is no one else's business. And if that is the vibe that you're getting from somebody that's trying to help guide you to grieve properly,
you probably need to find another.
You need to find another support
person to help you, to support you in that moment. Don't necessarily have to give them double middle fingers.
But it's okay if you do.
But you could.
You can do whatever you want. You're having a rough time. So, okay.
So finally,
self-care, always something that we like to focus on.
The cornerstone of the weekly wellness mantra.
It really is. And
paying attention to physical health.
Hugely important.
Emotional health.
Yes, physical health. And then, because obviously taking care of your physical being, everything is interconnected. So how we feel and how we feel physically and how we feel mentally, everything is connected. So, seeing your doctor, making sure that you are not slipping into bad habits like, drinking too much, starting to drink too much, using drugs, picking up a smoking habit that you dropped a long time ago. So paying attention to your physical being, again, just keeping in mind that everything is connected, and how we feel emotionally is very connected to how we feel physically. Eating the right kinds of foods, taking walks, being kind to yourself.
Being kind to yourself. Just flat out being kind to yourself. I mean, God, we find so many reasons to beat the hell out of ourselves all the time.
We do.
So
And let other people beat the hell out of us sometimes.
Other people do it as well. And so the idea that, my Lord, is, especially when you're grieving, find ways to be nice to yourself, treat yourself. If there's ever a time for you to be kind to yourself, it's when you're in mourning. Mm-hmm. And it's okay. It's okay.
It is okay to be and feel whatever you are at that time. And if you do need to bring out the double middle fingers,
you can do that.
You can do that too.
You can do that.
You had brought up...
Oh, yeah, my dissertation professor, whom I love dearly, said something very, very wise to me about really just life in general. He said that he believes that human beings are equipped to have only one major life change a year.
And that really does make sense. I mean...
Yeah. I mean, and he really meant it. So he said, if you lose a loved one, don't go move into another house. And
right. So you've already had
later,
this huge life change with the passing of a loved one.
Right.
And so another major life change would be, buying a house.
Buying a house.
Moving to another state.
Suddenly changing a job, doing something totally different. I mean, it's just, it bears thinking about, because sometimes we don't process a loss immediately. We might think, hey, everything's okay. I'm doing a really good job. I'm not concerned about this. Let me go do something else to keep moving forward. It may not be the time.
Right.
It may be wiser to sit with it and deal with it and make sure that 6 months down the road, it doesn't suddenly come up and bite you in the butt.
Right.
And just to give yourself some room to actually get through the experience.
So knowing that you have just experienced this major life change, do not go out and make another major life change.
Yeah, just wait on it.
Postpone those changes
if possible.
If possible. Obviously, we can't control everything, but
and what about the what ifs?
The what? Well, yes.
Part
the
of self-care.
What ifs, part of self-care, and yes. So continuing to dwell on the past, and when it comes to the death of a loved one. What if I would have, for someone that passed in a car accident, what if I would have just called them and told them, stay where you are, all the things that we have no control over anymore because the death has happened.
Right.
And so to dwell on these what ifs and what could I have done that would have changed how things turned out.
And sometimes you want it so badly, you want to change it so badly that it almost feels good in that moment to say, well, what if I done that? Because it almost feels like you have control.
And you don't.
You do not. But you can almost fool yourself into thinking, oh, God, if I had just done this and this and this and this, and you can almost live in it again.
Right. And
it will wreck you.
You're torturing yourself, and it is... So just trying, and it's not going to be easy to avoid doing that because you'll probably do that to an extent, but trying to not stay stuck in the what if land and dwelling on the past, because when we talk about just accepting that life is for the living, and it will take effort
and time
to begin
to move through it,
to live again, and to be able to live in the present. It really takes effort to be able to stay present and start living again in the present and not dwelling on the past. And you are going to have to put in that effort.
Yep.
And it's when we dwell on the past, we're not putting in the effort
to move forward.
And the discomfort of dealing with that person is no longer here. It doesn't matter what if that person's not here, and it feels terrible, and I'm going to have to move through the terrible.
And moving through the terrible is
terrible.
Just terrible.
Yeah. And that is the only way to start living again.
Yeah, and that's true.
And when we talked about, I remembered something when we talked about not judging other people's way of grieving.
Yeah, don't judge other people's grief. Yes. Don't do it.
And I remember when recently, well, I don't know, there's that actor, Patton Oswalt.
That's who I was thinking about.
Yeah, so because he
Patton Oswalt,
he had this.
He got so much grief.
I know, and I got to admit, he
Yeah.
was married to this writer. She passed away very suddenly, very unexpectedly, at a very young age, in her sleep, and they had a little girl. They had a very happy marriage, apparently. And then I remember reading about that when it happened. I was like, oh, that's just terrible. That's horrible. And then, about
8 months later, he got remarried.
8 months later.
And people threw a fit.
They did. But I also have to admit, as much as I'm preaching this, I was like, oh, wow, that's really soon.
But I will tell you, I read that, and the first thing I thought was, good for him. And I know that maybe
it is
people
good for him.
think that's horrible.
No, it's not.
But I really felt that.
It is good for him. And it doesn't discount the love he had for his wife before.
It still has, likely.
Or still has?
Yeah.
Not at all. But even I was like, wow, that's really soon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I were friends with this person, I don't know that I would have expressed that, but and I don't know these people, but I was just thinking, wow, it hasn't even been a year.
Yeah.
But
there's judging.
what does that mean? But I'm judging.
Judging
That's exactly what I'm
this
doing.
man's grief. Yeah.
Exactly. But and he has moved on happily with another wife, and why is that not perfectly okay?
Yeah.
Why is that not wonderful? Mm-hmm. And I admit that I even was like,
go Patton.
I that's exactly how I feel now.
Yeah.
But in that moment, I was just like,
Yeah.
wow. But it doesn't mean anything.
But I also think
we shouldn't let him be happy.
We should just let folks be happy. Life is
Right.
too short to not be happy. If you can find happiness,
Absolutely.
find your happiness.
Absolutely.
But also, I think it's important that when we have a spouse or a significant other, we get used to that person being there. Mm-hmm. And some of us internalize that more than others.
Yes.
And so if you're a person who really needs a person to be there, it's not, in my head, it makes a lot of sense that you would go out and seek somebody who gives you that same kind of feeling, that same kind of support, that same kind of love that you really, really need in order to move on.
Right.
And I think we just support folks that do that. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Not everybody can, not everybody would. I totally respect that. But hell, if that's what you need to get through this life,
perfectly okay?
Life is hard enough.
Right. It doesn't mean
Let it be.
Yeah. It doesn't mean there was anything wrong. It doesn't mean they didn't love that person before. So anyway,
just let them move
shame
on.
on me. But
No,
it was just
it's
it was
not
momentary.
shame.
No.
It's important to recognize that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we do not judge other people on
Right.
how they grieve and how they get through
Their loss.
this loss.
Yeah.
So
that's the story.
that's the
Ms.
story.
K.
Yes,
That's
it is.
it.
And I think that about sums it up here for tonight. It's for weekly wellness. We can get through.
We can.
And we can process the passing of loved ones, and we have to because it's inevitable.
It's inevitable.
Um,
It is, yeah.
But
Yeah.
okay.
It's gotta happen.
All right.
Yeah. So next week, I don't know what we're going to talk
We're
about.
not sure what we're talking about next week, but we will be here, maybe in a different room in the house. I don't know.
We could do like a tour. It could be like a
tour of the Kinjorski house.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll sit in the bathroom on the floor.
Be funny.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that would be good.
Get in that big.
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe we'll sit on the tile bathroom floor.
we could do that.
I mean, it just makes the show just even more fascinating.
we go to my house.
Yeah, we could go.
I don't have any furniture in my house.
We should start doing that, and that's okay too.
We could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have used dental floss on my floor.
Oh yeah, where'd that go? I do now. I don't often sit on the floor, so you see things that
I just don't understand why it didn't make it to the back. I'm feeling judgy towards you. I have to tell you, it's gross. It's a little gross.
On that note, have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for joining us. Come back next week, next Thursday, approximately 7:30.
Right.
It's a little.
It's quarter to 8 now.
Ooh.
We talked a lot.
Okay.
Good night.
Thanks for joining us.
See ya.
Bye.